Anthem Blue Cross and Common Threads are helping schools across the country learn about healthier food preparation. And here in LA, they're joined by the Sparks and will provide education, recipes, and knowledge to students and families about healthier options. Learn more at anthem.com/ca/sparks. Anthem Blue Cross is the trade name of Blue Cross of California.
It's important to properly dispose of unwanted medication or sharps. MedProject offers free and convenient disposal options near you. To learn more, call 844-MED-PROJECT or visit medproject.org.
Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis, happy Friday to you. Hope you're having a good one. Wanted to come on and finally catch up on the day this is released. I've been pre-recording pretty much all week because my dad had surgery, and thank you guys for all the well wishes. He sat and read them while he was in the hospital overnight and was blown away just at how far and wide people are that listen to this. He couldn't believe it. His artery in his leg was clogged 95%. So they got, did little plumbing work. He's all set. So I'm a little late thanking some people who donated this week. Want to give a big thank you to Jody and Rebecca, Kathy, Frederick, Kelly, Patricia, Allison, and Laura. So those went right into the Boise Trial Travel Fund. So your generosity is very much appreciated. And had a few people reach out to tell me the difference between a priesthood and a patriarchal blessing. So most adult men in good standing with the church can administer priesthood blessings for comfort or healing. A patriarch is a specific, higher, significant calling within the priesthood. And a patriarchal blessing is typically only received one time in your life. So thank you, guys. I'm learning every day about this case, doing this, and also about the LDS religion. So thank you guys for keeping me up to date when I can make it clear for other people who may not know. All right, song fact of the day. Stevie Nicks, one of my favorites, as you know, actually wearing my shirt today. She wrote Landslide in 1973 during a 3-month stay in Aspen, Colorado, while her then boyfriend, Lindsey Buckingham, was working. Their first record was a flop, didn't do much at all, and she felt like her world was just kind of falling apart. And while surrounded by the snow-covered hills, she reflected upon her life and considered whether or not she would continue to make music. And also whether or not she would continue her relationship with Lindsey. A part of this song also is about her dad. He was having surgery the day after she wrote this. And when she did the VH1 Live, she opened it up by saying, "This is for you, Daddy," which is just so sweet. She said, "I realized then that everything could tumble. And when you're in Colorado and you're surrounded by these incredible mountains, you think, avalanche. It meant the whole world could tumble around us and the landslide would bring you down. And when you're in that kind of a snow-covered surrounding place, you don't just go out and yell because the whole mountain could come down on you. I feel like a little child, unable to make a real substantial decision. And we were talking about our lives, the rest of our lives." She wrote that song in 5 minutes. I believe she was sitting on the floor of her friend's cabin with a guitar. Crazy. All right, so I've had some requests for some Chatty Potter graphics. And if you remember, Chad said he felt like Harry Potter in the cupboard under the stairs. So there's Chatty Potter. I'm going to tell you guys, y'all should be thankful this is a family-friendly podcast, I guess you could say. Not something you want to necessarily listen with your 5-year-old with, but I had a million wand jokes, I'm just going to say, and I didn't do them, so I was tempted. One more. If you remember, Chad was using the seer stone to get these revelations. So we have Chatty Potter and the seer stone. I'll put these up in the link in the description for you guys that are not watching on YouTube. You guys can see Chatty Potter. All right, so we're going to keep going here. We are at December the 9th. The last episode, remember, Ian had written this huge document of things that he had learned in the very, very short time he had been married to Melanice. December 9th, Kay emails Detective Moffat and asks if there's any word on JJ's medication being refilled. She also says she's been in contact with Arizona and Idaho authorities with hers and Larry's concerns for JJ. So December the 9th, Alex sends a text to Zulema asking if she ordered the storms that are occurring. And she responds that she ordered the storms when they were having a barbecue. Lord have mercy, y'all. Okay. So moving along, December 9th. Still, Lori logs into the app from JJ School and views posts on there that were made by the school. And at this point, they are married now. They've been to Hawaii, got married. Alex and Zulema are married. Melanice and Ian are married. They've had the welfare check and the search warrant at those townhomes. So clearly Lori knows they're on to them. And I think there was maybe one time she logged on where there wasn't something kind of surrounding that timeline. But this, you have to wonder, was she looking to see if there was any chatter among staff or anybody, families about JJ? December 10th, Alex asked Chad to give him a blessing because he was having a bad attack and he couldn't breathe. So back in Hawaii, a resident on the island told Justin Lum from Fox 10 Phoenix, awesome Justin Lum, who, by the way, is going to be on that Netflix special September 14th. Can't wait to see him on there. They told Justin that Lori and Chad had moved into their condo around this time in Princeville, Hawaii, in a gated community on a golf course. Justin said he was told Lori and Chad were seen hanging by the pool a few times, but not seen much other than that. So just on a price scale, because Hawaii's super expensive, the condo was a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, 1,700 square foot. The listing price was almost $718,000. Rent was around $3,000 to $4,000 a month. And I'll put this picture also up on the drive for you guys to see. So you can see where they were living in December. So December the 11th, we get to the point to where Tammy Daybell's body is exhumed. Employees with city parks arrived around 6 a.m. to prepare. And in attendance, aside from investigators, were the county attorneys, sheriff from Idaho, sheriff from Utah, coroners, coroner's assistants, and a funeral director. Witnesses arrived at 3:30 a.m. and then they exhumed her body for autopsy. This picture that's up, I found this on online. The Daily Mail had taken these. I assume this is after they exhumed her because the funeral pictures, it was October. There was no snow on the ground. There's no headstone here either. So I'm assuming these pictures are when, from after she was reburied. So they completed that autopsy and she was reburied around 2:30 p.m. that day. I believe I learned that on Shane Bishop, who is a Dateline producer. He tweets out little facts during the Dateline episodes, all very interesting stuff. I believe that's where I got that from. Chad called Tammy's sister Samantha at some point and asked if they knew anything about Tammy being exhumed, and they did not. We've heard that it was Chad who told Alex they were exhuming her body. Tammy's dad said they did not know they were exhuming her body until police told them, and this was afterwards. So they went to her grave and found that it had been dug up. And what's interesting, and normally I don't put stuff up unless I can totally verify it, but this has been pretty much all but confirmed from what I can tell. There was a post on a Reddit forum that was titled Grief Support. So it's a place where you can go and it's all, people about grief, that allegedly came from Emma Daybell, which is Chad's daughter. And the post says, exhuming body without family permission. My mother passed away October 19th, 2019. The coroner told us natural causes. It looked like the textbook definition of heart failure. The death was unexpected, and my family has taken it hard. My dad has already remarried. A friend of the family lost her husband earlier this year, and for whatever reason, she and my dad decided to tie the knot. It feels weird, but I already have a positive relationship with my new, and she put in quotes, stepmom, and she has helped our family grieve. It's definitely a weird marriage. Both still talk of their former spouses frequently. My dad misses my mother terribly. A few neighbors, led by my aunt and in our small town, have decided that since my dad remarried so quickly, he murdered my mother. This started out as a benign, though hurtful rumor. It has escalated to the point, however, that they exhumed my mom's body for an autopsy. The family had no warning. We went to visit her grave and her body had been dug up. I don't know the results of the autopsy yet, but I feel extremely violated. I just want to grieve. I'm hurt that my aunt would cause so much trouble. Has anyone else experienced anything like this? I feel so alone. And that's a sad post to me. I mean, look, I know people have their opinions, especially about Emma, but you really see that conflict in there. If you remember also on that phone call with Melanie Gibb, Chad talks about Samantha, who's Tammy's sister, being dark and kind of leading these ideas that Tammy Daybell was murdered. And you see clearly he's got to the kids about this, or at least who we think is Emma who wrote this. But I just want to grieve. And look, I mean, this is the things these kids had to deal with emotionally within such a short amount of time, literally weeks, it's got to be tough. So we get to December 12th, and the Karma bus was like pedal down, just traveling right along. Alex Cox suspiciously dies in Gilbert, Arizona, 2.5 weeks after he married Zulema. So before we get to the actual 911 call when he's dead, there were some things that happened that day. Chad sends Alex a text asking how he's doing, and Alex says he is winded every time he stands up and his resting pulse is 100. So at 11:53 a.m., Alex says, I feel like the poison from the spear in the heart has done some residual damage. Chad tells Alex that he paid the bills on the Rexburg house, and Alex said he was just going to let it go along with all of his stuff. Remember, at this point, Chad and Lori are in Hawaii. Also, before his death, he received a priesthood blessing over the phone from Chad. At 12:15 p.m., Melanese calls Alex, and she told Nate Eaton from East Idaho News that she was telling Alex she would meet him halfway between Idaho and Arizona to bring some of his things to him. And he tells her to wait because he isn't feeling good. She also said Alex gave her marriage advice that morning, and she wrote it down. Sorry, y'all. Lost my place. Okay, so at 12:38 p.m., Alex calls Chad. 12:47 p.m., Alex texts Melanese. That's a big no-go on your stuff. Just buy a new computer. They don't give it back to you. They're holding it for leverage until you help them, so just write it off. Her computer was seized in that search warrant in Rexburg, so that's what they're talking about. And at some point, Lori calls Zulema and tells her to check on Alex. So she calls him and he says, I can't breathe. I'm having a hard time breathing. Zulema calls her son who is home, and he said Alex was not doing well. Zulema tells him to call 911. So we don't know at what point he finds Alex on the floor in relation to when Zulema told him to call 911. But I'm going to tell you right now, all these calls between Alex and Chad, and then Lori calling to say check on Alex, and then the poison in my heart. He was cremated, so we will not know any different, but I have suspicions. Investigators note the last activity on Alex's phone was a call to Chad and Lori on the Raphael number. Other than that, there's very little communication from Alex. What's weird about the day he dies, other than the fact that Tammy Daybell had been exhumed, this was the date of the all-agency meeting to talk about the case. And at the end of the meeting, Gilbert PD was informed Alex had been the subject of a 911 call, and the detective later learned that Alex had died. They were wanting to talk to Alex about Charles Vallow's murder and also about the attempt on Brandon and Tammy. And here is my thing. They were following Alex and Zulema. We know because in the notes, it says they were seen leaving in his truck for 50 minutes or whatever. Why didn't they get him before then? I mean, at least Charles's murder, they could have brought him in because there were so many consistencies that investigators noted that their stories didn't line up. I mean, so many answers died with that man that day that we will never know what truly happened, I think, in all this, other than what we can piece together with the evidence Rexburg has. But I think there's a lot of things we'll never find out. So that 911 call came in at 3:20 p.m. Joseph, who is Zulema's son, he bless his heart, he was a little nervous. He said, I have an older male here named Alex. He just passed out here on my bathroom. The dispatch asks if he's unconscious, and Joseph says yes. And the dispatch asks if he's breathing normally. Can you see his chest rise and fall? And Joseph says, I hope so. He's asked how old Alex is, and Joseph said in his 40s. I think he was 51. The dispatch asked, do you know him? And he says, this is my mother's boyfriend, which I thought was interesting. I don't think Zulema had told maybe at least Joseph that was his stepdad. Joseph said he's on his side, and dispatch asked him to put him flat on his back. He says, there's feces there, and I'm trying to keep cool right now. She said, I know it's gross, but let's get him on his back to see if he's breathing. And Joseph says, Alex, we got to get you on your back. Dispatch asks if he's awake or asleep, and Joseph said he's more passed out, he's breathing. And then he's asked if Alex is making any weird sounds, and Joseph said he's making an exhale sound like woo. Look, y'all, I ain't trying to laugh when somebody dies, but this dude was evil, so woo. The dispatch tells him to start CPR, and this is when the Karma bus makes a stop right there at Alex. Dispatch says to start CPR. Joseph says, I don't think I can do that. And he says he can't a few times. And so instead of doing that, he's like, yo, Alex. And then he says he's not breathing. If you remember, guys, I don't know, like I'm itchy. Something has got to me. If you're on YouTube and you see me, like I don't have scabies or nothing, like I'm having a reaction to something. So dispatch says to lay him on his back. And Joseph says he can't because Alex is too big. And Joseph said, my mom just got here. And then he yells, come here. It's really bad. Come upstairs in the bathroom. We need to get him on his back. Dispatch tells Zulema to get him on his back and start CPR. And Zulema says she knows how to do it. She asks how far out they are, and dispatch says they're out front now. So Zulema tells them they're on the second floor. Dispatch asks for Alex's last name, and Joseph said he does not know. So there's some body cam footage of when he dies in the house and at the hospital. I watched these and transcribed them a while back. The first video is 5 minutes and 57 seconds. And as the officer arrives, we see fire trucks and an ambulance on the street. As the officer walks up, we kind of hear a conversation that's in progress. An officer says he hasn't been flatlined. He hasn't been flatlined the whole time. He says EMS is he tells EMS not to clean up, just to get their gear. And the EMT says they bagged some stuff before they were told not to clean up. So the officer double checks nobody's upstairs, and the officer goes next door and asks to use the hose. He had something on his shoe. So I think maybe he stepped in something in the bathroom where Alex was. Video 2 is a little longer, 13 minutes, 22 seconds. The officer enters and goes upstairs. You can hear them working on Alex. Everything's blurred out. There was no screenshots to get, y'all. Sorry. The EMT asks if he left suction downstairs, and he asks for it. The officer says, our detectives are coming out. If you're not transporting him, just leave him be because we have other stuff we have to do at the house. Another officer says anything with drugs, anything she's not telling us, and he says, we don't know. One of our detective sergeants, and he's interrupted. And another officer says, are they working something on him? And the officer replies, yes, I had no idea what it is or what's going on. In the background, we hear an officer ask Zulema who she is, and she spells her name. So you hear him say he's not flatlined. He's showing a PEA, so there's still a rhythm. And a PEA is a pulseless electrical activity where you have cardiac rhythm that should produce a pulse, but it doesn't. This is found actually in 55% of people in cardiac arrest, and he is not responsive to the paddles to shock him. They say if he goes into asystic, they'll call his death. Asystic is he's flatlined. In the background, you can hear them suctioning his throat. And the officer says, just from walking around the house, my assumption is it's drug related. He has little blow torches down there. And another officer mentions Cialis, which is an erectile dysfunction drug. In the background, you see them doing CPR, blurred out, and Alex is laying on the floor. An officer who's searching a room is asked if he's seen anything, and the officer says his license is up there and they're looking for it, Alex's driver's license. He said he was found in the bathroom and they brought him out. The EMT says, I don't know if he's swelling or if it's secretions. The officer says he was still moaning when his son found him. He was trying to move a little and went out. The wife did a little CPR, then you got here. The officer then goes downstairs. Zulema's daughter is on the phone and says, here's the officer in charge, Mom. So a man is on a speaker. She's got the phone. There's a man talking, and she has it on speaker. I think maybe it's Zulema's son-in-law, and asks the officer to wait outside if you don't mind. And the officer says, so as of right now, we have standing in the house. If you want, I can go get the supervisor, but we are not leaving at this point. So Zulema says, we don't understand why there's a search warrant, so we're going to call our lawyer and see how this is going because we don't want any more. If you could not ask my wife any questions. I'm sorry, that was the son-in-law who said that on the phone. He then tells Zulema's daughter to not answer any questions. He said, I'm going to call my lawyer. I'll see you in a minute. I mean, straight out of the gate, call the lawyer. You know, if you've got nothing to be worried about, why are you calling your lawyer so quick? Seems like her family was kind of in the dark a little bit about this, though. So a sergeant with Gilbert PD introduces himself as Mark to Zulema's daughter. She asks if she needs to get her mother back on the phone, and he says, you can if you'd like, or you can talk to me first and see if she needs to be on the phone. She calls Zulema, and the sergeant asks the sergeant if it's possible for them to wait outside. My kids are going through enough trauma as it is without you guys standing right next to them. All three of my children have anxiety, and you guys aren't making it any better right now. Why do you guys need a warrant for my house? And the sergeant says, we definitely aren't trying to make things worse. We're not trying to have anybody feel bad or be anxious. But someone died in your house today, and we're not going to leave your house until we finish that investigation, and we're going to secure it while we seek a search warrant from the judge.
It's important to properly dispose of unwanted medication or sharps. MedProject offers free and convenient disposal options near you. To learn more, call 844-MED-PROJECT or visit medproject.org.
And if the judge grants it, we'll conduct a search as necessary to finish the death investigation. If the judge doesn't, we'll leave. But for now, we're going to stand by the house and control individuals' movements in the house. They're not required to stay here, so if they would like to leave, they are free to leave. But we will not be leaving the house at this time. And Zulema says, okay, so let me ask you this. Why are you saying someone died at my house when he was pronounced dead at the hospital? So this is after the hospital visit and all that. He says, well, the incident started here, and I get he was pronounced deceased at the hospital, but it started in this house. And Zulema says, I see. The sergeant says, we're not trying to traumatize anyone here. Zulema says, you are. You are, Sergeant. You're entitled to your opinion, but we have a job to do. And unfortunately, sometimes that makes people feel uncomfortable. That's not our intent, but that's where we stand right now. But your children that are here right now are adults, and they're free to leave. We're not holding them here, but we're not going to hold the house, but we're going to hold the house while we seek the search warrant. And Zulema says, okay, I'm going to get a hold of my lawyer and see if he can call back. And the sergeant said, I have no need to speak to your lawyer. It's not going to change anything, but you're more than welcome to call. You have every right to. Zulema says, that's what she's going to do. Someone asks, are you on your way here? And Zulema says, I'm in the Jeep right now. I'm just going to go to I'm sorry. Someone asks, are you on your way here? I'm in the Jeep right now. I'm just going to go to the house. I was hoping they would let me say goodbye because the detectives took me out of the room. So that was from Zulema. Sorry, y'all. The officer asks if they have any questions, and they say no. He says to let them know if they do and reminds them they're free to leave, but not to wander around the house. He says they have a responsibility as investigators to determine if something bad happened in the house or if it's just natural causes, and they do that because Alex cannot speak for himself. So the body cam footage at the hospital was very, very long. It was over 2 hours, I think 2.5 hours at least. The video starts at the house. You hear someone ask if they have an airway on Alex, and someone says yes. So the officer asks, when was he found? And Zulema's son replies about 15 minutes ago. He said his mother called and said to go check on him, and he says his mom was at work. He went in there, and there was feces and vomit. She got home and helped with CPR. He said he was having an anxiety attack, and someone on the phone was telling him how to do CPR. So the officer asked, who is he to you? Is he your dad? And he says, my mom's boyfriend. The officer asked why she wanted him to check on Alex. And he said his mom called and said he's on the floor, which I thought was interesting. How would Zulema know he's on the floor if she's at work? It's weird. The officer asked, had she talked to him? And her son said Zulema told him Alex was having some problems. So the officer tells them to go downstairs, and Zulema is there. And he asks if there's any illegal drugs, and Zulema says Alex doesn't use drugs or alcohol. The officer asks if Alex has been sick lately, and Zulema said shortness of breath. He would get it going up the stairs, and the last couple of days it's been when he gets up and he's like, oh, I feel so winded. The officer asks if he's seen a doctor or anybody he sees regularly, and she says no, he's the healthiest person. So Zulema is crying at this point and asks if Alex is going to be okay. So we're kind of hopping back to the house before the hospital. The officer, she said he was blue in his face when she walked in, and she started doing compressions. The officer asked when she last talked to him, and Zulema said he was talking to a friend on the phone, said he wasn't feeling well, so the friend said they would give him a blessing, and her friends texted her and said, you better get home now. He's not doing well. He's on the ground in the bathroom. So I called my son and said, go over there and make sure he doesn't pass out. I'm on my way home. She tells her son to hang up and call 911. Here's my question. I wonder if this blessing was like a FaceTime. Because how would they know where Alex is in the house and that he was on the floor unless Alex said I'm on the floor? I just thought it was weird. So the officer asked if she knew when the blessing was, and she checks her phone and says it was at 3:18. Zulema called her son, though, at 3:15. They asked how the friends knew he was in trouble, and Zulema said he was talking to Joseph, but Joseph said no, he was passed out, Mom. Man, this poor kid. He's young. You could hear the stress in his voice. You have to live with this for the rest of his life, too. So the officer updates Zulema that Alex does not have a pulse right now and is not breathing. They're doing compressions, giving him medications, trying to restart his heart, but they tell her he's in extremely critical condition. Joseph again says there was feces in there, and 911 told him to roll him on his back. The officer asked Joseph if he moved anything away from or off of Alex, and he said no, that his mom rolled Alex onto his back from his right side. Zulema said she straddled him to start compressions. So the officer asked if there's any friends or family they need to call, and Zulema says she needs to call Kara, who is her daughter, and the officer offers to make that call. Zulema said he could. So he comes back and said she isn't answering, and Zulema says she's at work, and so she'll text her herself. But at this point, the video switches over to the emergency room. You can still hear them doing CPR and using the breathing tube, and they're giving him epinephrine. Excuse me. So here's the thing. At this point, like, you have to want, they are going to very extreme measures. They try for a very long time to resuscitate Alex when really it seemed he was dead. And, for quite a while, I'm sure a lot of that had to do with the fact that they really, knew Alex was in up to his eyeballs in this. So then, let's see. Sorry, my mouse died, so I'm having to use my little arrow button. I couldn't tell at this point what was asked of the officer, but the officer said there's reasons. I'm guessing he's asking why he needs to stay there. So the officer is relaying that Joseph was talking to him through the door, and he says it went silent. He opened the door, Alex was on the ground, and the officer says they were almost there to the house when they upgraded that code. In the background of the video, you see them putting blankets on Alex to try to keep him warm. Staff member says the wife is coming in the room, and you see Zulema go to the left of the foot of the bed, and she says, Alex, I know you can hear me. You need to come back to me, honey. I know you can hear me. Come back. And she says that like several times. The officer is on the phone, and he says they're still working on him now. We've got 20 people in this room. So the officer asks on a radio when compressions were started, and someone responds at 3:29. So that would have been 45 minutes, and he still wasn't responding. And we see staff members kind of switching off, taking turns doing CPR. If you've never done CPR, it is so physically, like, it will exhaust you. At one point, we see Zulema go to the foot of the bed and start rubbing his feet. And then they stop and they say he doesn't have a pulse. And they talk about how a rhythm comes back sometimes, but he's still just not responding to CPR. So they call the death at 4:19 p.m. They did compressions for about 50 minutes total. They gave him, get this, 13 rounds of epinephrine, 8 before the hospital and 5 at the hospital. The officer calls someone to tell the time of death and said the wife is here with the body. And he is told by someone over the phone to stay with Alex's body. So at this point, you know that they're having this all agency meeting. And can you imagine what it was like in that room when they get word Alex is down? Like, he's not going to make it, because they knew at that point Alex was heavily involved in these attempted murders, and they knew he shot Charles. And so things were heating up, and they were really starting to seriously investigate Charles's murder at this point. So I'm sure that was devastating to those officers in a way, because they knew your major player's now dead. So Zulema is at the head of the bed, kind of leaning over his body. And the nurse is asking her about who to call to inform them of Alex's death. And she names off her kids. And you can hear Zulema crying. A nurse said something about calling the medical examiner. And the officer says he's not here for medical examiner reasons. And it sounds like she said she didn't want them to show up with Zulema there. Another nurse comes up and asks if he's there for the medical examiner. And the officer says he's here for other reasons. And the nurse asked, is this for another case? And the officer says yes. He said they would get her more information, and the other detectives were on their way to the hospital. They asked Zulema if he had traveled recently, and Zulema said he went to Mexico on Saturday. She said when he woke up the morning he died, he was feeling better. And I think she said she wanted to take him to an urgent care or something. And Alex said, I'll be okay. I don't want you to take me. She said he woke up at 8 o'clock, and when I guess she left around 9, he was fine. Zulema calls Jose, who I think is her son-in-law, and asks where he is. And I couldn't understand what he said, but he said something about her house. And Zulema says he's gone. She asks how Joseph is doing and says he's okay. He tells her he's sorry and doesn't know what to say, and asks if she wants him to come there. And she says someone needs to stay with Joseph because he was freaking out when she left. He says he will get someone to sit with Joseph and he'll be on his way. And she tells her son-in-law where she is. An investigator shows up, and the officer turns off his body cam audio very briefly. So like almost 2 hours into this officer is still standing there. And finally he pulls up a stool. I don't know. I'd have done been in the floor. That I had a crew working on me standing there for 2 hours. A medical staff member comes in asking for the cart because they need it. And he asks if he can wait a bit because once he gets direction, when the investigator comes of what to do, he'll let him know. The staff member says that Alex is still plugged into the pads. And then the audio goes out. So that's kind of the end of that hospital stuff. There was some things later that night where Zulema went into a police car, and then her son-in-law was like, don't talk. And then she quit talking, and he was really dictating a lot of the stuff, as far as like, don't talk, we'll get the lawyer. Melanie Gibb told Nate Eaton that her bishop called her asking why there were cop cars around Alex and Zulema's house. So she explained a few things to him. And he was the one that called her back and told her that Alex was dead. At some point after his death, his mom, Janice, is notified. And she did not know he was back in Arizona or that he had gotten married. This was a couple of days, I believe, after his death. So on December 13th, in an email between investigators, it says he is deceased as of 4/19 yesterday. He was found with labored breathing, unresponsive at his shared residence with Zulema. Zulema and her family refused to provide statements, but they did talk to initial officers. And then in the email, they say, this is the case that keeps on giving. Also on the 13th, Chad's daughter, Emma, and her husband, Joseph, are interviewed by Detective Dave Hope, I believe at the school where Emma works at. Also on this day, there's an email from JJ's school that says they're overwhelmed by all of this, and they're emotional, and they know Lori lied to them, and they were brought into this nightmare situation. At this point, the school was worried that Lori herself may show up with her crazy self. And a staff member says, are you confident we're safe? Should we be doing anything different? Individuals are scared due to her irrational behavior and doomsday talk. The investigator assures them that Lori is in Hawaii. They also say they've seen where she's still been accessing the Blooms app for parents. So in an email between investigators, they said that one of the investigators says he spoke with Ian that evening and said that Chad and Lori called Melanice and told her that Rexburg PD had contacted 2 of his kids and threatened to exhume Tammy's body. And Chad and Lori thought this was a lie. Law enforcement notes that Chad and Lori apparently don't know she was already exhumed and an autopsy had taken place, but they didn't volunteer that information to Ian. Chad and Lori told Melanice they were being bullied by Rexburg PD and planned to get a lawyer to represent them and Chad's kids. His kids will then refer law enforcement to the lawyer. They also hear a rumor that the FBI is involved, and they thought it was a scare tactic. It was not a scare tactic, Chatty Potter. So let's see here. Investigators contact Lori's sister, Summer, and she says she hasn't seen or heard from JJ or Tylee in months and said she thought they were with Lori and not in danger. She said she thought their attempt to locate JJ was an attempt by Kay to gain custody of JJ. And the investigator said they're not trying to get JJ. They just want to observe and speak with him either in person or on a video call. So on December the 14th, Alex's autopsy takes place. They collect a blood clot and major case prints from Alex, which they will be using that DNA probably right now at this very moment. This DNA stuff's being tested. So the autopsy started at 8:07 a.m. Rexburg PD and the FBI were in attendance. So the disclaimer on the autopsy report says, as with all death investigations, opinions expressed herein are amendable to change should new, reliable, and pertinent information come to light. Let's hope that's the case. Cause of death, bilateral lung clots. That means clots in both lungs. Contributing cause of death was what they call hardening of the arteries and hypertensive cardiac disease, but it was ruled, as we know, natural causes. The left side was worse of the lungs. He had a benign mass on his liver, a polyp in his stomach, an enlarged prostate, which is usually age-related. Toxicology was negative. Zulema said he wasn't taking any medications, although he went to Mexico to get medications, so that makes no sense. He had Narcan in his system, but this is very normal when you come up on a scene where somebody's just unexplainably in the floor unconscious in case it is drug overdose related. There's no harm in giving it because if it's not, there's no negative effect for the most part for the person. He was positive for caffeine. And so Janice, let's see, it says Dr. Burton Bentley II told East Idaho News, people who form clots usually have a reason. They've either had a prior clot or they have a clotting disorder or they have an acute attributing factor. So also he was cremated, as we know, and Janice was on 2020 this was before the kid's body. So this was, I think, May of 2020 when this happened. And they talked about his service. And she said they didn't invite anyone who thought he was a murderer. So, I mean, she said it was a small, precious group of people who loved him. I bet it was a small group. So Alex's family released a statement to East Idaho News through their attorneys, Robert Jarvis and Garrett Smith, once it was found to be natural. And I did not put that here, y'all. I'm sorry. Okay, but Melanie's told Nate Eaton from East Idaho News, I can tell you now the statement was, yeah, we never doubted it was natural. You know, Alex was perfect, essentially. But Melanie's told Nate Eaton from East Idaho News, he seemed okay, but I knew that week before he was having some trouble with and she doesn't complete that sentence. She kind of diverts. Then he says at one point she was going to meet up with Alex halfway between Idaho and Arizona to bring him some of his stuff, but he said, let's wait. I'm not feeling very good. The week before, he said, I just kind of have a tightness in my chest or having trouble breathing. He said he bent down to get a water bottle and it took the breath out of him. Zulema was absolutely worried and was like, you need to go to the doctor. And Alex said, no. She said, Melanie said there was absolute shock when I got the phone call from Zulema and she was telling me, and then she trails off and doesn't finish that sentence. She said she called Alex every other day after he moved back to Arizona and that Alex repeatedly gave her marriage advice that morning, which she wrote down. She said she had not been close with Alex for most of her life until she started having problems in her last marriage. She said he would never judge anyone. Nobody could do any wrong in his eyes. He was very positive. Gibb told Nate Eaton that from East Idaho News that Alex was living with his new wife and we were all in the same ward. The bishop called asking, and she said it was an interesting conversation and she explained a little bit of things to him. And she said it completely threw her when the bishop called her back and said he was dead. She also said that Alex did realize that she was going to the police about what she knew, and that was made known to Alex. I don't know if she's insinuating, he offed himself because of her. On Dateline, Keith Morrison said investigators wanted to question him about Charles's murder, Brandon and Tammy. December 14th, in an email between Detective Moffat and Kay, he tells her Alex's autopsy was that day and it was natural causes. And he says the grand finale was a pulmonary embolism. Let's see. Kay asks if there's a problem if she emails Lori and Chad both to ask for JJ. And Kay emails them and says the reason she wanted to send an email to Chad is to maybe have him catch her in a lie and make him think instead of using the body part he's currently thinking with. Gross. Also on the 14th, an FBI agent said that Ian told him Chad and Lori had called Melanie's the night before and said Rexburg PD had contacted 2 of Chad's kids and threatened to exhume Tammy's body. Per the FBI agent, Chad and Lori just were unaware that they had already done this and she was reburied. So we're going to end there. I wanted to get through Alex's death. It's such a major part of this story because you're looking at Chad, Lori, and Alex were seemingly the main players in having a physical hand in these murders and these attempts. And it was had to be so surreal to everybody who had really, started investigating all this stuff, because I don't think it was until Kay had the welfare check called in, they start the surveillance and realize we're not seeing kids that, whoa, now we've got Charles Vallow's dead. Tammy Daybell's dead. Brandon was shot at. The kids are missing. So anyways, all just crazy, man. You couldn't write this story any more crazy than it is. All right, guys, we will see you soon. Hope you have a great weekend. See you Monday.
Okay, round 2. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
It's important to properly dispose of unwanted medication or sharps. MedProject offers free and convenient disposal options near you. To learn more, call 844-MED-PROJECT or visit medproject.org.